The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, Roadshow Wednesday, back here at the College World Series at Zipline, the downtown tap room here in Omaha, North 16th Street, 721 North 16th, just around the corner from Charles Schwab Field. Do not take a drink. I have not said TD Ameritrade yet. I was good yesterday. I was flawless. I was 5 for 5 at the plate. Be 5 for 5 at the tap here with Zipline. All sorts of choices. Elijah partook in the
Italian style Pilsner.
Italian Pilsner.
Did not taste enough like garlic and tomato sauce for my liking.
Which good. That's okay. That's a heavy pour. I had myself a can opener. It was summer and refreshing. And Connor, you didn't get a beer last night with us anyway. Apologize about that, good buddy. You're chained to the studio. Oh, water.
We're back at it with the water.
You can see and make that judgment call yourself if Connor's actually drinking water or if it's McCormick's. You can watch the show, Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed. Give us a follow there at HVarsity Radio. And the bookend for you, the morning shift and show with Coffee and Cream, Damon and Andrew. We get you home 4 to 6 with Hail Varsity Radio. So LSU fans going to start barging in here in short order as they get primed and prepped for their elimination game tonight. They did the deed last night against Tennessee. They are back alive, as LSU fan loves. Wake Forest is on the doorstep of getting to the championship series and saving all sorts of pitching if they can do that. Florida able to outlast TCU and send the Horned Frogs home. A miraculous play in center field to close it out and send Florida to the championship bracket. 489-1240, 489-1240, number to get in. We're here in the loft region of Zipline, so they've got the bar set up. They've got a giant projection set up for you to watch baseball if you like, or whatever ESPN's got on right now. They've got kind of a shelf for you to set your beer if you want to stand, if you've been sitting all day, and they have all sorts of activities you can partake in.
You're burying the lead here also. I believe, from my count yesterday, I believe it's 16 different beers they have on tap, all made by Zipline
I didn't do
Brewery.
the count. I misstepped there on my end with the countage.
Great.
But they're all 5-star.
All 5-star and all a great way to refresh yourself in between games if you're at the College World Series. Got about 2 hours before the start of the game tonight. Sounds like a great time to come visit us, come visit your friends at Zipline, get yourself one of every single beer that they have on tap, and you'll be all set to go for the 6 o'clock game.
I would pace oneself and enjoy what you like in moderation. It is still humid. It is still partly sunny outside. We have plenty to get into, as your comments are always welcome on the email, chris@hailvarsity.com, in the stream with the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, and, of course, on Twitter. Mike Babcock, great Husker historian, author, Hall of Famer. We'll talk some Huskers and some college baseball with Babbers coming up here in about 15 minutes. He is in the green room, ready to go with us in 15 minutes. In hour 2, Evan Bland going to join us on site. Evan's been in the press box. He's been covering the College World Series for the Omaha World Herald. So Evan joins us live on site here at Zipline. And then a Jock Doc before we say goodbye. 489-1240. We'll dive into potentially the Dae'vonn Hall situation. Is he back in play for Nebraska? We'll get to that. We'll talk a little bit about recruiting here. Really good story by Max Olson. of The Athletic. Max, a Nebraska graduate, and does just a tremendous job with his college football coverage. And it's kind of an annual tradition where you reassess recruiting classes, and 4 or 5 years later, what was the hit rate? What was the miss rate? And what was the gray area? Also, another story out with the NBA draft tomorrow, the top 50 prospects and projections across all sports with the hype surrounding the headliner names of many of the drafts, be it the NFL or NBA or Major League Baseball, NHL. So we'll get there. Bill Bender has a really good feature out on that.
Well, it's funny, though. You talked about the annual tradition, which is obviously recruiting or re-ranking the recruiting classes of years past. The Athletic does it every single year. But whenever you were going there, I thought you were going to say the annual tradition of Dylan Raiola transferring high schools.
Yeah, we'll touch on that. We'll get there this hour as well. We don't need Don to roll in and start cracking heads. So, guys, when you think of Nebraska football and what 2019 brought, it brought plenty of excitement. It brought excitement for a couple of different reasons. One, how Nebraska finished 2018. I know it was a 4-8 season, but the way they finished, how well they played, they coulda, shoulda, woulda against Ohio State. They coulda, shoulda, woulda against Iowa, and they were right there. Things looked promising. You felt pretty good. You had all sorts of runway left for Adrian and company, and then you brought in a really highly ranked class to come off a 4-8 season and then go land a top 20 class. Nebraska, with the 24/7 composite ranking, came in 17th. And Elijah, you've got some of the names in front of us. You have Wandale Robinson, Nick Henrich, Noah Pola Gates, Bryce Benhart, Ty Robinson, Luke McCaffrey, Jakeem Green was a name, and then the receiving core with Houston and Chase, and Nance, Chris Hickman as well. Ramir Johnson still fighting the good fight, as is Ty Robinson. Ronald Tompkins was going to be a baller and tough running back. Dedrick Mills performed well. Miles Farmer's been good, as is Quentin Newsome. Two guys you're penciling in: Mosai Newsome, Jamin Graham. You have Garrett Nelson, who graduated. Javen Wright Buddha's trying to get healthy. Snodgrass, part of that class. We have a few more when we scroll down. Ethan Piper looks to try and find a spot on the line. And you also had Vokalek come in as a transfer that didn't count as part of the class, but he's a guy. Darian Daniels was part of it as well. Noah made a nice touchdown catch against Maryland or Rutgers, or probably both. So these are some names you know. Who am I missing on the defensive end? 2020 was some guys we're still waiting on a little bit here with Butler, Jamari Butler, and Blaze Gunnerson.
Yeah,
that's 2020. Mm-hmm. But 2019, I mean, look at the two headline guys, Wandale and McCaffrey, both took off. And Nebraska, one of 9 teams that was a top 25 recruiting class, fellas, in 2019 to not finish in the revisited and revised top 25 rankings. Texas, number 3, didn't finish in the top 25. LSU, number 5, coming off a national championship, didn't finish ranked. Oklahoma, Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Purdue. You've seen coaching changes for one reason or another, constantly at Tennessee, at Florida, at Texas, at LSU, at Oklahoma, with Lincoln bolting for that $90 million payday, and of course Nebraska. Can we ask why? Can we figure out the why here? Is it evaluation? Is it coaching? Is it a little bit of both? I know we had a similar conversation yesterday, but now we have names to go with the rankings. And on its face, you still have 3 guys, 3 key cogs defensively that have a senior year to play out.
Well, yeah, this is the class that, for Scott Frost and for his staff, was supposed to be the class that led the way. It's supposed to lead the turnaround. This is the class that was supposed to build the foundation. And this class was anything but building the foundation. I'm using the 4 stars as an example because you had 9 of them. And based on what we said yesterday on this show, 4 stars are supposed to be guys that have some traits that are highly projectable with some development. And you think 1 to 2 years in a college strength and conditioning program, 1 to 2 years seeing some high-level competition and practice, these are going to be guys that you can rely upon to lead the way for you. If you get a couple 3 stars that can crop up and make some key contributions, which Nebraska, to be fair, did get in this class. When you look down at the 3 stars, they had a better hit rate among the 3 stars they did in the 4 stars. I mean, 3 stars in this class. Ramir Johnson, Miles Farmer, Quentin Newsom, Garrett Nelson, even Brant Banks, if you want to put him in there. I know he wasn't always the most loved Husker during his time on the offensive line, but guys that exceeded expectations from what you would expect from a 3-star. I would say Nebraska did all right among the 3 stars they had in this class. They weren't perfect, but you're never going to be perfect with your 3 stars. That's how 3 stars work, is, you know what, there's some traits that you can work on, that you can develop into something, and it might take a couple years, but they're going to see the field eventually. That's what I think a 3-star athlete is in the modern college football. But you look at the 4 stars, Nebraska's hit rate is low on the 4 stars among the guys that you're expecting to lead the way in this class. I mean, Wan'Dale Robinson hit for a couple years before he transferred, obviously, to Kentucky, finding a better fit for himself.
He hit at Kentucky. I mean, there was a 3rd-round pick.
Did he hit it in Nebraska?
No.
I think
he hit it. I would say yes, he hit it in Nebraska, but then he was smart enough to get the hell out.
Yes. And then you look further down the 4 stars. Nick Henrich is another guy I would put down as a hit. Yes, that worked out for you. And Ty Robinson is probably the last guy I would say among your 4 stars that has at least lived up to expectations. The other 4 stars that you can list: Noah Pola-Gates,
gone, portal.
Bryce Benhart never has quite lived up to expectations.
Work in progress.
Luke McCaffrey was never a quarterback, and he made himself a quarterback. I think he's a very talented athlete, but he was never going to make it as a quarterback at high-level Division I. Jakeem Green, he was a community college guy, still listed as a 4th star. Never quite saw the field at Nebraska. Darian Chase, wide receiver, never saw the field at Nebraska. Demarion Houston, 4-star, never saw the field at Nebraska. These are the guys that you're expecting to build your class upon and be the guys that are leading the way for a rebuild. And for our 6 out of 9, if not 7 out of 9 of these 4-star guys, they never saw the field at Nebraska, or if they did, their best football wasn't played at Nebraska. And for that one, I'm mostly looking at Wan'Dale Robinson. That is the ultimate failure of a class, whenever the guys that are most highly touted, that you went the hardest on the recruiting trail after, that you're expecting to lead the way in your program rebuild, are those guys. That class is an abject failure.
It was not good. And, Connor, what's important here is, what are you able to project with your recruits? What are you able to envision them doing? And then can they deliver that for you? Nebraska for years would be in that 20 to 30 recruiting ranking. It's not that they haven't had top 5 or top 15 classes. They have. But can you jump that initial number 5 or 10 spots to match an end-of-season ranking? And what do you do with that talent? Case in point, as we've revised the rankings, the 1 and 2 rankings were spot on. Georgia was the number 1 class in 2019. Of course, that crew won 2 national championships and played for a 3rd. So the analysts were on the money there, 49-5. That also includes a 46% attrition rate. That also includes losing Fields from Georgia to Ohio State. Ohio State comes in at number 2. Their attrition rate at 40%. That includes a Joe Burrow. And 42-6 was incredible. Number 3, this is where we've seen Michigan make their move. Michigan was 36-11 in that span. Their class was ranked 8th. They really hunkered down defensively. Their standouts were all in that front 7 with a safety or 2 or a hybrid guy mixed in. They upped their finish 5 spots, and you've seen that with back-to-back playoff appearances. Bama was ranked 1st in the class. They finished 4th as they revise. They've had some kids take off. They've maybe misevaluated a little bit for them, but they've just kind of plugged and played other talent, and it's not quite had the edge of 2 championship appearances. They split, they lost 1, they won 1, but for them to go from 1st to 4th, it's still pretty darn good. It was a bit shocking to see them go 11-2 last year. So your thoughts on this, Connor, with the rankings, the reassessment, and the Nebraska part of this?
Yeah, I think the rankings, play more of a factor when you're a national championship contender because, as you mentioned, they're all pretty spot on when you look at the top of the list. But when it comes to a school like Nebraska, and Elijah said it, a lot of your 4-stars didn't pop, right? And that kind of goes back to the argument. We talked about this briefly yesterday about how numbers don't really necessarily tell the entire story every single time you do recruiting. A lot of those 3-stars saw a lot of that playing time, and they made a lot of the impact there. So, that's what's more impressive to me. But, at the same time, we all know that the development under the Frost era wasn't the greatest, yet your 3-stars on paper were outperforming your 4-stars on the field, right? So I don't really know where to go with that argument based off of that.
There's some development, but not development of the higher caliber kid you brought in.
Right, and because I think that's a part of an assumption that they're already there, right? And you're focusing more attention on the 3-star, which is fine, but at the same time, you have to treat everybody that walks in that door like they're all the same on paper out of high school, unless they're like a generational 5-star like Dylan Raiola or a quarterback of that nature comes to mind.
Well, we'll reset the rankings. Ohio State was a 14th ranked recruiting class that finished second. Georgia was number 2. They finished 1. And you have Michigan, the work they did. They over-delivered. Mike Babcock's with us. Hail Varsity continues, presented by Currency, live here at Zipline.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Lots of LSU purple wandering in here to Zipline. We're downtown Omaha, North 16th Street, 721, the downtown tap room. Big thanks to Zipline for having us out for the last several years for the College World Series. Can watch the show on Hail Varsity Radio, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. We welcome in Mr. Husker Football. Mike Babcock joins us at MD Babs on Twitter. You see the pictures, the awards, and the office backdrop, Mike. It's really awesome. I want to start off with some words from you on a legendary Husker and NFL Hall of Famer that played for John Madden, Bob Brown. I never got to meet Bob or know Bob, but I loved his Hall of Fame speech a few years back, and the grin and smile in his voice when he talked about crazy bunch of guys he played with for Oakland and John Madden. And Mike, take it away on the great Bob Brown passing away last week.
If you had a Mount Rushmore of Huskers, I think that Bob would be at the top of the list. Maybe he played at a time when you played both offense and defense. He was a linebacker. And if you think about the time that he played and you think about his size, he was about 6'5" and about 240 something when he played at Nebraska. That was a huge linebacker. And my uncle, who was the equipment manager at Nebraska from 1965 to 77, and also he worked on the field before that. He was one of the field guys. He said that Bob Brown was so strong that he would just, as linebacker, he would just bend over and have his arms down, and blockers would come at him, and he would just lift his arms and knock the blockers away, and put himself in a position to make a tackle. And then in the NFL, obviously, he played offensive guard. But I had the opportunity to speak with him on a handful of occasions. He was a very cordial person, and I just think that it was fitting that his number 64 jersey was retired, and again, as I said, if you had a Mount Rushmore, he'd be one of the people in consideration, serious consideration, because he was a great player and by all indications a great person.
AFL and NFL, each league drafted him second overall in the draft, but he was pretty integral in Bob Devaney's first year. Bob had him, and I don't know if you touched on this with Bob Brown in past interviews or not, but as good a player as Bob Brown was, his buy-in was probably pretty important for that first year of Dae'vonn's success.
Yeah, I think there's no question. Although, Bob said one of the things when he got here, the players were here. The facilities weren't. And, his predecessor had been the recruiting coordinator at Oklahoma at one point. And so Bill Jennings was able to bring in the kinds of players that then Bob was able to develop. There were several NFL guys that were in that group that were already here. But, again, Bob was at the top of the list. And he was from Ohio. That was one of the areas that Nebraska recruited during that period and was able to get some players in addition to Bob. And his brother, they recruited him as well in order to get him. But, it was pretty interesting. I think the original thought was that Bob might go to UCLA or USC, one of the Southern California schools. Because he had the opportunity to come to Nebraska, which was going to recruit his brother, he was very family-oriented, and that sort of swung the pendulum in Nebraska's favor.
Mike Babcock's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, a zoom-out question here when you think about the legacy of Bob Brown. You mentioned the fact that he played both ways. That's rare in modern college football. It's less rare back then, but whenever you look back through the years of Husker football, which guys would you have liked to see try the other side of the ball? Which notable Huskers do you think, you know what, try them on both sides of the ball, they'll be dominant wherever they play? What guys do you think of? Because it's a rare trait to have.
Well, rather than do that, I'll give you another example of a guy who played offensive guard. Now this was after the two platoon system came into play, so it was a different kind of a situation. But his first season, sophomore season at Nebraska, Wayne Malin played offensive guard. Okay, his junior year they moved him to middle guard on defense, and his senior year he finished 9th in voting for the Heisman Trophy on a defense that led the nation in total defense for a 6-4 team. The first of two 6-4 teams that got a petition circulating in Omaha to get rid of Bob Dae'vonn. Can you imagine that now? 2 6-4 seasons, petition circulated to get rid of Bob Dae'vonn. Bob Dae'vonn always joked that he never saw a lot of the mail because his secretary would go through the mail and then only give him the things that he should see, so she threw it away. He didn't know anything about this petition that was circulating, but he said if he'd have known about it, he probably would have signed it himself. But so, that's a guy that I think really stands out, and you don't hear much about Wayne Malin. It seems to me, probably again because of the time that he played. He was senior in 1967, but to go from offensive guard to middle guard. And that was a whole different defense, obviously. There's another guy, Rich Glover, middle guard, a tremendous player. Memorable in the Oklahoma game of the century, had 22 tackles lining up against an All-American center. Pretty remarkable. So, it's hard for me as I look at it because it seems like so many of the great players that Nebraska has had have been appropriately set, that they played on the side of the ball that they should have played on, and it never occurred to me that, hey, should I see Grant Wistrom on the other side of the ball as a tight end or whatever, because he was such a great defensive player. And that's kind of the way it has always been. And that was one of the earmarks of what Tom Osborne's teams did, was that you guys were talking about recruiting. He recruited to fit his system. It didn't necessarily amount to who had the most stars, and that star system wasn't necessarily in place early on when Osborne was the head coach. But they evaluated recruits still, and it wasn't always the highly recruited guys that they needed. It was the guys that they could bring in and fit their needs and fit the system and develop.
Mike Babcock's with us. Few minutes, Hail Varsity Radio. We're live here at Zipline between ball games for the College World Series. Wake Forest tonight against LSU. Mike, do you anticipate history repeating itself? And that is, once Nebraska looks at, evaluates, and offers a kid, you'll see a bunch of other colleges and teams do the same because of Matt Rule's reputation. Nebraska had that happen, specifically Colorado, when they were building their program. They didn't want a kid unless Nebraska offered him. Do you think Nebraska seems to be in very early on a lot of kids that may end up with a ton of offers once Nebraska offers, or kids that are under the radar that if things go right with development and fit, they could be guys. It could be a total 180 from this 2019 class we're talking about last segment.
I think that Nebraska has a ways to go now because of what the records have been. And you look at it and say, well, they haven't had that great a record in the last, 6 years since Nebraska's been in a bowl game. So I think you're less likely to say, oh, Nebraska's going after that guy, even though Matt Rule is, given his reputation and his connections in Texas specifically, it's probably still a question of you've got to have some success on the field before programs start looking at who Nebraska's recruiting, and should we go after that person because Nebraska is recruiting. But you're right, back in the day there was a time when that was very much the case. If Nebraska looked at the guy, bunches of programs would come in and go after the same guy because of what Nebraska could do in terms of development and having success with guys that came in.
Now, when Matt Rule offers somebody early, Mike, obviously really good track record of developing. And yes, Nebraska hasn't had very much success in the past 6-7 years, but that's not the same regime, say, as the one now. Do you think that makes any difference at all?
Well, I think it makes some difference, but I think that it is probably balanced a little bit by 7-on-7 camps and, position coaches and during the off season and all the things that are going on now. And with social media, it's really difficult to find talent that other schools are not familiar with, if that makes any sense. There was a time when you could do that, but I think it's more and more difficult to do that, and as a result, I think it's more what happens on the field now. He hasn't coached a Nebraska team yet. We've seen it at Baylor and Temple. So let's see what happens that first year, and if Nebraska has some measure of success, however you measure that, it could turn into that people look at it and say, this guy is a good recruiter. He's a good evaluator of talent. If Nebraska's going after that kid, we ought to look into it as well. But I think you have to have some success to go along with that reputation.
Mike Babcock with us, historian, author, Hall of Famer. The yearbook is in mailboxes. Incredible work by Mike and the Hail Varsity crew. Get your magazine today, hailvarsity.com. Get the subscription, digital and print, hailvarsity.com/offer. You'll be pleased you did. Mike, awesome to talk some ball today. Thanks for a few minutes with us.
Let me leave with more purple haze.
Love it. There he is, Mike Babcock. Babbers, you take care, brother. Appreciate you. More from Zipline. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Mike Babcock for joining us last segment. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, where you can get the segments you want to hear, the whole show or just parts of the program with Hail Varsity Radio. the podcast, the YouTube channel also with Hail Varsity. You can watch the video stream. We're here at Zipline, downtown Omaha, tap room, 721 North 16th Street, getting geared up for round 2 of LSU Wake Forest elimination game for LSU. The Tigers win tonight. They force an elimination game tomorrow night. Florida's sitting good, their feet's up, cigar in hand, as they got rid of TCU a little bit earlier. A lot of sad purple in front of us down in the tap room, bellied up to the bar with TCU. And then the always happy purple with LSU fan getting after it with the wonderful spirits and choices here at Zipline. Someday I want to bump into Go Tigers here at the College World Series. It'd be good to see Easy Ed. We had fun with Coach Eckler yesterday. He told a funny, well, not even a funny story, but just kind of a recruiting thought bubble from Ed Orgeron when they worked together at USC. Check the Mike Eckler interview out on the Hail Varsity podcast page, Hurrdat Family Media. We'll get into maybe a third T-Bird to join the party for Nebraska in next hour. Evan Bland should be on site with us. Evan will join us at 5:05. Thoughts on the CWS, Nebraska football, plenty of camps, big weekend of recruiting, priority weekend for the Big Red and Coach Rule. So we'll get to all of that here coming up. More of your comments on the Hail Varsity YouTube stream as well. So news on Dylan Raiola and also Danny Kalen. I know you guys touched on it Friday. You and Bill Dolman did with the Elite 11 competition. Nebraska's first quarterback ever to land in the Elite 11. Danny Kalen made that happen. Congrats to him. Lots of hard work, incredible talent. Just really, really a special quarterback. Dylan Raiola showed out, balled out, was incredible. Finished first or second, depending on what site you favor. You have Sayin from Alabama, another in the long list of talented quarterbacks Saban has continued to get post Cam Newton loss almost 12 years ago.
Well, and they need it. When you look at Alabama's roster this year, it's still a question mark who their quarterback's going to be going into the fall. And how often do you say that about Alabama football, that you don't have a great idea? I mean, it could be a transfer who comes in and wins the Alabama starting job next season, because what we saw from the Alabama quarterback room in spring was not great. So it's huge for them to go get a guy who is consensus top 3 quarterback in the country. Good for Saban. I mean, obviously you're stacking riches at Alabama at this point, but whenever you look at team needs, Alabama quarterback is right at the top of their list.
Well, I mean, gone are the days where
A.J. McCarron can lead you to a national championship game.
Where your offensive line is so great that you don't need a playmaker at quarterback. You can have a manager. Their championship quarterbacks were good, but they were more in the Stetson Bennett mold where they could make a play, but they didn't have to go win it for you. Gone are the days where Mac Jones waited 4 years behind Tua and Jalen Hurts with the portal. So you have this news out on Dylan Raiola as he is, well, in the high school portal again. This is high school number 4, and this isn't to pinata the kid. Honestly, I don't care. I mean, go play where you're comfortable. Comfort right now is going to be in Buford, Georgia. He was in for spring, make that winter training at Pinnacle High School. But Raiola, the Georgia commit as of May 15th, is going to play his final year of prep ball for Buford, Georgia. Buford prints Division I talent. Buford plays a schedule that would make the Big Ten West blush. I'm kidding. That was a low blow. Forgive me. But in all honesty, it's not like he's going to an easy place to go play a senior year.
He's not slumming in Georgia.
No, he's playing in Buford, Georgia.
Well, I mean, when
the fourth high school, but probably the 4th ranked high school in the world.
Yeah, Buford has now 3 5-stars on their roster. They have KJ Bolden, a safety, likely going to Georgia. They also have a guy in Edric Houston, who's an edge rusher for that Buford, Georgia team. Right now it's between Ohio State and Georgia for his talents. Read in between the lines there on what this means for Dylan Raiola. Again, this is not to pinata the kid. 4 high schools in 4 years is interesting. I'm not sure I would recommend it, but I get it. Whenever you look at this, is now not about your senior year of high school anymore. This is about the talent you're trying to stack at Georgia in your recruiting class. I see this as pure recruiting all day. Both those guys, Bolden and Houston, are uncommitted right now. After a year of playing with Dylan Raiola, maybe take him to a state title game, are they going to be more likely to pick Georgia? I would say likely yes. This is what this strikes me as. It's pure recruiting from the Raiolas and from Dylan. Fine. Go do that. I think it's a bit of a low blow to your teammates at Pinnacle, who were your teammates for 4 months. Apparently there was spring training that went on there. You got to know your teammates, and now you're just going to say 2 months before the season, you know what, sorry, see you later. I'm off to Georgia to go play my high school football.
Taylor Martinez, to be fair, did have 4 high schools before he came to Nebraska. You were going to jump in, Connor?
Well, I mean, 4 high schools in 4 years. I mean, we think 4 colleges in 4 years is absurd, right? And I mean,
it's going to be the norm.
Yeah, I get it too. And like, to Elijah's point, I mean, forget state championship. What about national championship this year? I mean, they're going to be that good, right? And that's the reason why he's going there, because he wants to play with higher talent, which is totally understandable. And he wants to surround himself with that. And I mean, he gets an extra year to really get into the Georgia culture, right, before he starts playing as a Bulldog. So I think it's, definitely a recruiting pitch for others in his age group or younger that potentially want to go play with him. But it's also a chance for him to really get acclimated into Georgia, feel super comfortable there before he even steps foot on campus as a player. And you also get to surround yourself with 4 and 5 stars everywhere and a chance to win a high school national championship before you go try and win a college national championship.
And again, I don't fault Dylan Raiola for making this choice, because I get it. If I was in his shoes, I'd probably do the exact same. You're trying to set up your future with all the talent you have down there. You know what? Get some pure recruiting done. What leaves a bad taste in my mouth is the teammates at Pinnacle that thought you were going to be their quarterback for 4 months, and now you're leaving them high and dry. That's what leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But at the end of the day, I can't fault a kid for choosing his own personal future and making the choice that is going to make his future the best possible for himself.
Did the coach at Pinnacle move heaven and earth for Dylan Raiola? Did this Georgia coach move heaven and earth at quarterback for Dylan Raiola? You presume he's got the starting spot locked up. You presume that. You hope that's not the case, but based on what he did in the Elite 11, the kid's going to go in and win the job. He's really, really good, really talented, and this is not going to be an unfamiliar situation for him. He's going to go into Georgia, try and win the job, and he'll be surrounded by the same caliber of athlete that he's been playing with in high school. We'll just see who transitions at a young age to be on the field with him, and we'll see if he transitions early in his career to be on the field.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Christian Lokacher. You remember the name?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a Texas A&M commit from College Station.
Then he moved to Southwest.
And then he moved to Lincoln Southwest when he committed to Nebraska. And then after graduation, after his senior year, he decommitted from Nebraska, went to LSU.
And he started at LSU as a freshman.
Great career there.
Well, he got hurt. He blew both knees, but he started.
Still had a good career there.
Yeah. So we'll wind down this first hour here at Zipline. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Find us on Twitter. We're down here at Zipline, the downtown Omaha tap room. Big thanks to Zipline having us out for another year and getting things rocking and rolling with the CWS. Is one side of the bracket complete. It is the Florida Gators. Will it be Wake with some rest, or will they have to go the extra mile against LSU for a third round? The rubber match, LSU and Wake tonight at 6, just a block away from us. 489-1240, 489-1240. The numbers to get in. We are going to get the Elijah Herbel shot update when it comes to Jello shots. No Jello shots here at Zipline. You don't need them because you've got 16 beers to choose from that are delicious. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. And then for Connor Clark, I will read it and say it slowly so we can get it all down. It's like that name, that last name on the back of the first baseman you grew up with that had 37 letters. C_Clark _20. There it is.
Oh, wait. I screwed it up.
You did.
I missed an underscore.
Screwed it up for the people on the video.
How long?
It's C_Clark _27. It's where you follow Connor Clark.
It's not
Reminder
that
to get
long in
buckled.
hiding.
No, it's not too bad. You get things buckled up. Do so. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Hands on the wheel. Eyes and mind straight ahead. The driver. One job, that's to drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. What is the Jello Shot total up to?
For the LSU Tigers, this is as of noon today. There's supposed to be another update coming here in the second hour of our show. 24,416 Jello shots. That is good to get one LSU fan drunk. So that's impressive. 24,000. As for Wake Forest, they're at 6,800. I'm rounding up. It's 6,798, but we'll call it 6,800.
It's still 1,800 more than their enrollment, so that's impressive.
TCU, this was before their what we learn now is their final game of the day. They were at 3,797. And coming up in fourth place was Oral Roberts, who I think was the fan favorite in Omaha with all the fun shirts and with just the unlikely story coming from the Summit League. They got 3,052 shots bought. I wonder how many of those actually came from Husker fans and those in and around the Nebraska area coming and supporting Oral Roberts there. And then coming up in fourth place, we have Tennessee, 2,122. So that's your Jello Shot update from Omaha. LSU has a lead. Does not look like they're going to relinquish that lead, and we already know they have the single-season record, which just feels like it's getting broken every single year at this point.
What Stanford end up with?
Stanford,
Did they do any work?
I don't think they broke 1,000.
No.
I don't think they broke 1,000, but let's check that for you. As Stanford has 759 shots, second to last. Only team in last place is Virginia with only 689 shots.
Oh, they went 0-2, which is too bad.
Well, it's funny how I say only 689, like that isn't thousands of dollars of proceeds for Rocco's. No shout-outs.
I've had Jello shots before. I just don't do them that often. I mean, I think we'll go to some parties where they'll be made. What's it take to feel it?
Oh, a lot of them. My big problem with Jello shots is the fact that you need to like get a finger all dirty by like loosening it from the shot. That's the problem with Jello shots for me. And you probably need about 1,000 to get drunk, but they're tasty.
You're more of a lime guy, grape, cherry.
Lime's up there, or orange.
My cousin Eddie. Hey, that's lime. Hour 2 on the way. Evan Bland joins us at Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. We have roped him in on site. The wonderful Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter. Evan,
good to be here, man.
You look thirsty.
You know, yeah, I am. It's a hot day, but like by CWS standards, this isn't bad.
No, it's a little cloud cover, a little partly sunny, partly cloudy. Evan's here with us. We're in the loft area of the downtown Zipline Tap Room, North 16th Street, 721 North 16th Street. 14th.
Good catch.
Make sure we get that right.
Well, you know where it's at. You've been coming here for years. We've been coming here for years. Yes, North 14th. Sorry. But yes, 721 North 14th here. The downtown Zipline Tap Room is immaculate. It's incredible. 16 beers for you to partake in responsibly, if you choose so. LSU fans getting after it. Evan, what do you think of this CWS? You've covered them for a lot of years. And is it me, or has the energy been better than past years with the CWS? I know we're not far removed from COVID, but it seems like it's just been pretty electric since the get-go.
Totally agree. Yeah, the games have been great, but I felt like even last week when the teams got in on Wednesday and then they had their media day on Thursday, like it was just, for the first time since 2019, it was just relaxed. You could talk to the players, the clubhouse was open, guys were just, they were excited to be here. And for the last couple of years, since the pandemic shut down the 2020 series, it's been a little bit tight. Everyone remembers 21 and NC State and how that ruined the competitive integrity to that series. And I think still last year people are still kind of coming out of it a little bit. But, man, it does feel like everyone's having a great time. The teams are relaxed. The fans are excited. The weather's been good, relatively speaking. We had the quote-unquote weather delay on the first day, but other than that, it's been great. The LSU has shown up in force. A lot of the other fan bases, I think, have been pretty impressive, too. TCU, heck, Oral Roberts has showed out pretty well. So, yeah, it's been a fun week. The games have been competitive. I think in 5 or 6 years, we'll look back on this series, too, and say there was a lot of future Major League Baseball stars that were here at this event.
And I think what it feels like to me is like the city of Omaha and the state of Nebraska is finally reaping the benefits of moving from Rosenblatt down here to the former TD Ameritrade, now Charles Schwab Field. I avoided putting one in the swear jar for that one, Schmidt. You should be proud of me. But it finally feels like that with just the baseball village that's been set up around, the national coverage is picking up. It feels like, especially down in the South, there's a lot of people that make this trip up every single year, regardless if their team's in it, just because of what this is in downtown Omaha. It's a unique experience, and it finally feels like the experience that the state of Nebraska hoped for with the College World Series is coming to fruition with everything that can be done, not only at the game, but around the stadium as well.
Totally agree. I was just talking about that with a couple fans recently, where I think back to 2011, 2012, when then TD Ameritrade Park had just opened. People were lamenting Rosenblatt. People were lamenting where the game was in terms of power and how that the equipment change had really shut that down. And there just wasn't a lot out here yet. It was a lot of empty space, a lot of blank canvas, so to speak. And absolutely, you can take a lap around the stadium now. You can go 2 blocks in most directions, and you have locomotives, you have restaurants, you have souvenir shops, you've got the baseball village, you have traditions starting with certain shots in gelatinous form that's going on just a block from here.
We just gave the update.
Like all that stuff. Yeah, that's great stuff. And I think some of it is tied, too, to the growth of college baseball in general. How many people the last 2 weekends watched Squeeze Play on ESPN, where you're watching 5 or 6 regional games or super regionals at once? More of these games are televised. I think people are more aware of what the teams are like, what the personalities, the players are when they get to Omaha. And so there's just more of a natural excitement. And so certainly you're going to get the fan bases from the schools, but I think you also continue to see just the power of the walk-up fan, the casual Omaha resident or somebody within driving distance that says, let's go hang out for a day. It's fun. It's colorful. If you want to drink, you can drink. If you want to eat, if you want to watch good baseball, like it's all available. It really does feel like the event has grown into itself here in the last 12 years.
And a minor thing here, I wonder how much the work from home, the fascination with that since COVID has impacted that. You know what? You can make it to a 1 o'clock start now in Omaha because you got all your work done in the morning from your sofa.
Or you can Zoom from your phone, Connor, and do a meeting that way, brother.
That's true. And if you're media, you can even do Zoom questions post game if you want.
Yeah. That's a win.
It's a brave new world.
It's a brave new world.
Well, in addition to, obviously, the atmosphere is great every single year, Evan. I went last year for the first time, and it felt like a block party that just so happened to have baseball going on in the background. But this year, you go on Twitter, and people are calling this, and especially the level of play, one of the best CWSs we've ever seen, and we're not even to the final yet. What's your take on the play on the field so far in these amazing games?
Right. Exactly. It's been fantastic. All the one-run games. We had another one just now with Florida and TCU, and not only was it a one-run game, but it ends on this amazing play at the wall from TCU's star hitter when they just fall short of tying this thing up. So the games have been good, and again, like you think about the ebbs and flows of college baseball, early in this park's history was when they made the BB course with the bats, and there were years there, 2013, 2014, where there were 3 total home runs hit at each College World Series, and it was, offense was way down. Those games were also close, but there wasn't the drama, there wasn't sort of the big moments that went along with it, and it feels like there's just, the game right now is in a sweet spot, especially at this park, in terms of, there is the home run, there's the threat of it. It's not it's not saturated, I don't think. And again, you have stars, like legitimate guys who are going to be first-round draft picks next month that you're going to see on major league teams in a couple of years. So I think that contributes to it. And then this field was a really good field, too, just in terms of if you want the underdog, you've got Oral Roberts. If you want the raw baseball talent, you've got Florida. If you want the brand name, you've got LSU and Tennessee. If you want kind of the team that's been the machine that hasn't been here in forever, you got Wake Forest. So a little bit of everything, too, I think has contributed to this field as well.
Back in the day, I think the last CWS championship game I went to, and it was a single game format. I went with a buddy in college, and it was USC v. Arizona State. It was the vintage 21-14.
The football game.
Goal line stand game, right, where everyone's sunburnt from knee to the top of the ears. So it's shifted. I think we all love offense, but you don't want that much offense, but you don't want, to your point, 3 total home runs, because this is a big old park to try and crush it out of. Evan Bland with us from the World Herald, at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter, hitting on the CWS. Last thought on some baseball here before we talk some football. What's the latest you're hearing here with the draft, with Bryce and with Max? How are things shaping up that way? Any movement, new teams entering in, any different positioning?
Yeah, I mean, I know they're at the Combine right now, and that's ongoing, and so a lot of that scouting and evaluation is taking place at this moment. I don't know how much they could necessarily change from what sort of the scout on them was during the season. I know a lot of people from a pro perspective felt like Bryce Matthews, who's played shortstop at Nebraska, who's played second base, maybe is destined to play outfield in some capacity. Certainly he's athletic enough to play just about anywhere in the field, but I imagine outfield eventually is where he'll end up. Max Anderson is a little more interesting. We've heard a lot of the assistant coaches who have talked to these scouts have often told the scouts, don't watch what Max does when he's not performing. Don't watch him in warm-ups. Don't watch him kind of milling around, because he doesn't necessarily pass the eye test in the way that a guy like Bryce Matthews does. But when the game starts, man, like, he doesn't commit errors. He's got a good arm. He's trustworthy. He's obviously got elite bat-to-ball skills.
Yes.
So he's got all the makeup for what you could want. But he's a guy, I'll be curious to see where he ends up. I think he could stay on the infield, maybe as a corner infielder. Maybe you move him out to left or something like that. Maybe he follows the Alex Gordon path as a pro. But, again, like, their bats play so well that I think you just kind of find a spot for those guys. And again, they've been pretty solid. I know Bryce Matthews has had a few run-ins with some wild throws from time to time, but like his physical makeup makes up for a lot of that. So I still expect they're going to be drafted in the first handful of rounds next month. In terms of where exactly they go, it's hard to say, but it's pretty safe to say they're going to be off to the pros here real soon.
Evan, want to get your take on a big recruiting weekend. Of course, Nebraska continues to get kids in on official visits.
Yeah.
Make an offer, and it's been a nice run of commitments for Coach Rule.
Yes.
And then you have some of the big names left on that 2024 board that are supposed to be in this weekend.
Yeah, it's been a big month for Nebraska, and they were always sort of looking toward the end to this upcoming end of June weekend. I know that's a big weekend for Carter Nelson from Ainsworth. That's one he's always looked at, and this is the end of his kind of individual official visit tour through the month. He's had some pretty big names the last few weeks, so that'll be big. But I've been struck by Nebraska's work this month. I think what surprised me a little bit has been how willing Nebraska coaches have been to have players come into camps, be evaluated firsthand, make offers to those kids, and then accept commitments from them. I think we haven't seen that from a Nebraska staff in recent memory. I think it's somewhat uncommon from a national perspective, but what it really says to me is these guys truly believe in their own evaluations. They're looking for the size, the speed, the intangibles, and it doesn't matter if you're a 3-star kid or a 2-star kid, or you don't have your profile picture on a recruiting site, page, whatever it might be. Like, these guys have their blueprint so ingrained that they're not afraid to go out and make these offers, and again, accept these commitments, as we've seen from a number of these players. This weekend's a little bit different, like you said, Chris. There's a little bit more maybe name talent that's coming here this weekend. It's their big chance to make an impression with these guys before that dead period hits in July and everybody scatters for a bit. So ideally, if you're the Huskers, this is your big chance to make an impression, hopefully get a couple other commitments, and then head into July with some momentum.
Evan, as you look at the recruiting class as it currently stands, I think we can expect Nebraska will pick up their fair share of 4 stars, their fair share of 3 stars, just with the stature of the program and the way some of these recruitments are trending. But which of those 2 groups do you think is it more important for this coaching staff to hit on? Because we looked back at the class of 2019, Nebraska did all right with itself in 3-star recruits, but among 4 stars, they really, really struggled to get hit rate. I think 7 out of 9 guys didn't even finish their careers at Nebraska among those 4 stars in that class. Which of those groups do you think Matt Rule and his staff need to make it a priority to make sure they get right? Is it the high number of 3 stars or the select group of 4 stars?
Well, I mean, I think you could make the argument either way.
Yeah.
I think this is a really interesting class because you don't have the luxury to say, hey, this has been a winning program. Hey, this has been a program that's developed players to go to the NFL. Mm-hmm. So I think it's unlikely and probably unrealistic to expect that too many guys are going to make that leap of faith with Nebraska when you could go to a place with a better track record. So I think in this class specifically, you're probably going to make that hay with some of those 3 stars. Those guys fit your metrics, sort of your baseline standards that you're looking for. If you can develop those guys, start winning, building some momentum in the next year or two, it becomes all that easier then to talk to the 4-star guys and say, look who we developed. We developed this guy who wasn't recruited. You're a guy who's maybe a little bit more renowned in recruiting circles. Imagine what we can do with you. So I think that's probably the key at this point. And we saw it at the end of the 23 cycle, too, with some of the players that they took who were late bloomers, who kind of went under the radar. I think you would include those guys in that group, too. But if you can show that you can take some guys who are unheralded, make them starters, make them fringe pro prospects, I think that's the first step that you take in convincing these next guys that they can trust Nebraska with their development.
Now, I kind of want to piggyback off of Elijah's point, too, when you talk about hit rate and finishing careers at Nebraska. I mean, how much can you value hit rate going forward? Because we talked about it last hour about, the Dylan Raiola situation, 4 high schools in 4 years. We've seen a lot of college players play 4 colleges in 4 years. So how much stock can you really put into hit rate of finishing your career where you started?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different set of rules than what Matt Rule had when he left Baylor to go to the NFL. There's no doubt about it. I think, in seeing how they build their culture, I feel like one maybe edge that Nebraska's looking for is player retention. Mm-hmm. In this era of the transfer portal when guys want to come and go. Like, you look at some of the things that this team has done in the offseason, the way that they build their culture, the communication between players and coaches, like the high standard that those assistants are held to. I've already heard players that have said, there have been times at my previous school where I didn't talk to the head coach for 2 years. And my assistant, we kind of knew each other, but it was on a football-only sort of basis. Like, these guys build, really strong relationships on the field, off the field. I think some of that speaks to the youth of this staff, where they have that ability to pour into these kids. And so I think I'll be curious to see how that plays out for Nebraska in future years, because it does seem like a place, Matt Rule's obviously a player's coach, where guys want to be and want to stay. Not to say that they won't utilize the portal and guys won't leave, but I just have a hunch that this program is going to be able to retain players at a higher rate than whatever the national average is.
Well, simply put, it's hard to be a developmental program whenever the guys you're developing are in the transfer portal. Whenever your young guys that are a third string on the roster, they're leaving, how are you going to develop?
Well, if you truly and genuinely make the effort to care about the kids you're bringing in, you hear every program say, oh, we love our kids. Well, there's actions to follow the words, and Rule puts the time in.
He does.
He puts the time in, and that may be the difference between bolting and sticking around and getting an extra year of development. Evan Bland with us here. We're at Zipline, North 14th Street. Hail Varsity continues. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Going through a Thursday here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Schmidt shaking hands, kissing babies down at the bar as you can come down and say hi. We're at Zipline North 14th Street in downtown Omaha. Get the tap room. I believe 16 beers on tap for you to choose from. And come say hi to Schmidt. You got about a couple minutes here as he looks like he's going to be a little bit of ways from it, making it back up here.
Yeah,
Unsure.
I was caught a little bit off guard because I had Adobe up on the computer in here, and then all of a sudden I hear Elijah bringing the show back. I was kind of confused. I didn't know if I did something wrong, but here we are.
No, it's why they pay me the big bucks, Connor,
exactly.
as Schmidt, despite the fact he's not in South Dakota, still not here, so it's the Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark show.
Well, that's why your name's on the
Schmitty
intro,
again.
okay?
Well, maybe you want to get yourself added? I can make a special intro for whenever you're in. I can do that for you. Connor, a quick update on the Jello Shot board challenge as LSU has broken 25,000 with 25,733 shots as of about 15 minutes ago. And my question to you, Connor, is to break a record like that, is it going to take Nebraska making the College World Series field? Because we've seen, at least from my experience and what I know about the grander scene of college football, it's been LSU and Ole Miss, two of the heavier drinking fan groups that have been breaking records here in Omaha with the shot board. Nebraska, to their credit, I think can keep up with the best of them. I don't think we see a Wisconsin making the College World Series field anytime soon, considering they don't have a baseball program. So is it going to take Nebraska making the College World Series field for that record to come down 25,000 shots and counting, as we're only, a couple days away from the end of the College World Series? You'd think maybe they can hit 30,000 with a strong finish from the LSU Tigers.
I think they will, especially if they make the final and everything. I don't know. I feel like another SEC team next year, though, could just walk in and say, hey, we want to break the record, right? Even if it's LSU again. I mean, they might want to break their own record next year. So, I mean, those SEC schools are crazy when it comes to that type of stuff. And when you have it recorded on a whiteboard and you can see the physical number, I guess that's more of an incentive. But, I mean, 25,000 is absurd. And it's even more impressive because, like, yeah, you factor in Nebraska, drinking fan base, locality. I mean, you don't have to go very far, so that could also be a part of it too, which makes the 25K for LSU that much more impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't know. Something tells me Nebraska fans could get to 30 with a deep run at the College World Series.
Oh, yeah.
I think Husker fans, they love breaking records. We saw it with the volleyball team at Memorial Stadium. Like, if they're going to be winning all the online polls, you might as well win the Jello Shot Challenge as well. As we welcome Chris Schmidt back into the show. How many autographs did you sign down there, Schmidt?
Did I ever tell you guys the story about the we were at Ono Street, pretty famous wing place, and this was early in the tailgate years, Saturdays. So it's a crowded bar room, and my sister-in-law doesn't need wings to float.
Okay.
In a swimming pool.
Okay.
And that's slender, athletic woman.
Yes.
Very, very, very pretty. So do the math on the no wings.
Now I'm confused.
Yeah.
Flotation devices.
Yes.
It's trying to be less piggish, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me.
I got there eventually.
So long and short, to mess with my father-in-law, who was there, she showed up and then kind of leaned over and had me sign the left part of her chest.
No way.
And I knew who she was. My father-in-law stared at me. My wife thought it was funny, but the whole bar room erupted. I don't know how many broadcast students we turned into that day or not.
How many kids are in the bar?
I want to be a radio loser. I want to be a radio guy. But, yeah, no, I was not signing any autographs. I was hydrating Mr. Evan Bland for his kind appearance here on Hail Varsity. We're here at Zipline, North 14th, just across from Charles Schwab Field. So the Stephen chiming in here on the Jello Shots. Ooh, that's a good idea. You think Trev would be pouring the old Jello Shots in and passing them out?
Task him with making them.
Trev would kill it. I think
Are we
he'd
only
do all
doing
right.
red, though? Is it only one color?
I think you kind of go clear and make it kind of a Sprite flavor.
How'd that work? Is there a clear Jello?
But you put...
You could make it.
I don't know. Well, you put whipped cream on top. There's your red, there's your white.
Yeah.
Well, if you go, there's got to be a white Jello flavor out there somewhere, right? Like a banana cream pie's got a bit of a yellow tint to it. There's a white. Oh no! What you can do is you add the sweetened condensed milk to your Jello and make it look like, so you got like the dark red and then like a whiter cream color using the sweetened condensed milk, right?
I have a feeling I know what Elijah's going to be doing this weekend.
Just maybe pudding shots. I don't know, man.
Pudding
shots.
That sounds so
pudding?
appetizing in late August.
Well, that's a good call.
Well, there's a notable comedian who made a lot of money off of pudding pops.
Yeah,
Similar concept.
Those were good, and then they went away.
Yeah, I wonder why. I wonder why they went away.
Let's talk recruiting before we get thrown in jail. So things seem to be back on for Dae'vonn Hall. Could Nebraska get a second and third T-Bird? Of course, Danny Kalen is in for Nebraska for 2024. You have McMorris that is weighing his options, but he's part of this weekend for Nebraska football. The stud wideout for Bell West here in town. And then, of course, Dae'vonn Hall has had a great career with Bell West and had a recent offer, I think it was Sunday, by Tennessee.
Yeah.
Now, what we don't know is that an immediately committable offer. I know Arkansas was interested. I know Oklahoma. So you have two of the premier wideouts in the state of Nebraska at one high school getting touchdown passes thrown to them by Danny Kalen. So about 2.5 weeks ago, Nebraska went their direction and Dae'vonn Hall went his direction. And you just wonder if there's been a stop and pause and say, okay, the quarterback that I'm playing with is going to Nebraska. My partner at wideout is considering seriously Nebraska. Some crystal balls have him headed that way, I think. USC, Penn State, Oklahoma in the mix as well, but I think it's going to be one hell of a great opportunity to see up close and personal Nebraska for McMorris. Great kid and really talented ball player. So if you're Dae'vonn Hall, and you're looking at where do I want to go play ball, is there room for me at Nebraska? What's my chances of getting a look-see at Tennessee? Are my chances to go to Tennessee dependent on someone else passing on Tennessee, or is it a situation where, yeah, I can end up at Tennessee? Long and short term here, Nebraska's back in the picture, and I think Nebraska's back in the picture because Hall said, you know what, I should really take a second look at Nebraska.
Yeah, and this was coming 2 weeks after we said, you know what, Hall to Nebraska may be off. My question is what side did this start from? Because we know he's had an offer. Was this Dae'vonn Hall reaching back out and saying, you know what, now that I've given you guys the stiff arm, I'm looking around at my options here. I'm not sure what the options look like.
How good are my options?
Yeah, like how seriously do these teams actually want me? Do they give me an offer and I thought I was top priority, and then I go back to them after stiff arming Nebraska and they're like, well, we've actually offered a couple more kids since we talked to you, and now you're number 5 on our priority list instead of number 1. We don't know what's going on there. You went to the Tennessee question, and the questions remain there because after going up on Sunday and putting in your Twitter, big announcement coming soon, you and McMorris tweeting the same thing. Now Tennessee jumps into the party, and you would get that offer. And the question, I think, with that, from what we've seen from recruiting confidentials and what we know about recruiting is this a team saying, whoa, hold your horses here before you make an announcement. We want to make sure you know that we might have a place for you. Let's send you the offer.
We like you, but we like others better.
Yeah, like let's have a backup plan here before you commit. We want to make sure you know that there's a chance of you coming around here. We don't know the full backstory of what's going on in this commitment, but we do know that this team is picking back up on Dae'vonn Hall coming to Nebraska, and there's a possibility, at least in my mind, does Nebraska become Bellevue West South?
It could. And listen, Coach Rule wants to prioritize Nebraska kids. He wants 500-mile radius guys. He's also shown the ability to be able to recruit and recommit a Xavier Betts, a talent like that. And if you're Hall, I mean, he's got some things he's been going through from I was the man and I'm still really good, but you look at production, yardage-wise anyway, here comes McMorris last year that out-yarded him, and you had a number of touchdowns. So that's not always easy to deal with if you've been the Randy Moss on your team to be a co-number one on your team moving forward. Now the goal's to win ball games and you deal with it, but it wasn't always easy, as competitive as it gets. So, maybe the look in the mirror here for Hall is Nebraska. I'd be damn lucky to be able to go to Nebraska, and maybe that's going to end up being my best option if Nebraska will have me.
And I think you got to use your resources here if you're Dae'vonn Hall, because you have a great resource in Xavier Betts, as you kind of laid out. Matt Rule is not the type of guy to, at least from what we've seen, until the ink is dry and you have signed to go somewhere else, he is not unwilling to come back around to you and say, hey, I know things changed in the recruiting process. How do you feel about Nebraska now? We saw him do that with Raiola. We saw him do that with Xavier Betts after taking a hiatus from football, now saying, hey, you've had some time to process. How do you feel about Nebraska now? Same thing with Daniel Kalen. You came back around to him. You're committed to Missouri, but things changed on our end of things, so we're going to come back around to you. We don't have too much pride to go and do that. You wonder if a similar situation is happening with Dae'vonn Hall right now, where 2-3 weeks ago, it looked like Dae'vonn Hall was out of the picture, but then circumstances changed. I'm not sure if that's with Dae'vonn. I'm not sure if that's with Nebraska. But you can come back around to him and say, hey, circumstances have changed. We don't have too much pride to come back around to you and say we want you.
Or maybe the kid and the family stop and pause for a moment and say, okay, let's on our end kind of reach out here and come back to Nebraska.
And we don't know the exact backstory of what's going on behind the scenes, but I think we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, circumstances have changed.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
Could be with Hall, could be with Nebraska, but I do believe the hype that's coming here with a transfer of power in this recruiting process as Nebraska seems to be getting back into the picture.
Could be 3 big-time T-Birds. One for sure is in. Do you get the 2 other wideouts? And we'll keep things posted, and maybe Hall is another name to this big visit weekend. Jock Doc's on the way. We're down here at Zipline, downtown Omaha. Hail Varsity continues. We're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hail Varsity Radio Roadshow Wednesday. We're here at Zipline, downtown Omaha, College World Series. It's a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center, Dr. Brandon Seifert with us. Dr. Brandon, how are the Dakotas treating you, bud?
Hey, they're fantastic. We're just kind of overlooking Sylvan Lake right now. It's beautiful. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Oh, you sound awesome. You sound well-rested. You sound like the humidity's non-existent, so we're all a bit jealous of that. Let's talk some NHL. I know it's baseball season, and the Stanley Cup just wrapped up, and a valiant effort by the Florida Panthers. Their defenseman, Aaron Ekblad, my goodness, give the guy some smelling salt, some ice, and a medal. Torn oblique. Shoulder dislocation, broken foot. He still played with all of those things happening. Now that the season is done, it's time for surgery. You could pick one of those doors. We're gonna pick the shoulder dislocation surgery, Dr. Brandon, and let's talk about cleaning that up for a real warrior on the ice.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. What a warrior. I mean, any one of those 3 things could, basically. So pretty amazing that he's out there still playing and doing his thing. The big thing is on the shoulder, it sounds like that's what they're really kind of going after at this point. And that really kind of becomes the big issue in terms of a recurrence issue. So we've talked a lot about shoulder dislocations in the past. Typically with your shoulder dislocations, they mostly occur as that ball portion kind of slides out to the front and the bottom. And as that happens, your shoulder joint is a ball and socket joint. On the socket side, there's a ring structure that sits around it called a labrum. And what happens is that ball portion slides over the front. It usually takes a piece of that kind of labrum with it and kind of peels it up off the bone. And so in addition to that labral tear, you'll develop tearing of this labrum. If it's just a first-time dislocation, oftentimes with some rehab, that labrum will heal back, usually not at the same place. place, but close to it. And then the question becomes, are you going to have kind of recurrent instability over the area? Pretty high risk of that, especially depending on the sport you're playing. Hockey, obviously contact, football, wrestling, that recurrence risk is pretty high. And so that's where you start to have this debate about, do you rehab it, leave it alone, or do you go in and fix it surgically?
Yeah, and whenever you are fixing that shoulder surgically, what is actually going on structurally within the shoulder? What's being done in the surgery as opposed to just popping it back into place and letting it heal up?
Yeah, and so the surgical portion of it is really focused in on just basically trying to repair that labrum that peels off or tears off. And the way we do that is through it's basically all done through the scope now, arthroscopic repair. And essentially what you do is you go in, you clean up kind of along that front edge where that labrum tears off, which is usually down at the bottom. So you think about when we're doing surgery on this, the glenoid, which is the socket part of it, kind of look at it like a clock face. And so as you kind of come down the front side of that clock, usually down at about 3 o'clock, down to about 5:30, sometimes all the way down to 6 o'clock is typically where that tear will happen. So at the scope, you'll go in, you clean up along that area, take out this kind of scar tissue debris. We actually take a little kind of shaver tool, if you will, and basically kind of debride that back to a bleeding base. And then we'll put these little anchors, we call them, which is some type of device that implants itself into the bone, whether it's a plastic screw or now we're using basically ones that are made from all suture. You put that into the bone. Coming out the back of that anchor is suture material, and then we loop that around the labrum. And I'll also grab onto the tissue called the capsule, which is this basically a strong tissue that surrounds the joint itself. It separates your joint from the rest of the body, and we'll actually suture that down on top of the labrum as well. And all that kind of pulls itself together as you tighten that suture down, and it pulls it down onto the socket where it's supposed to be. And then the goal of that is over time that will heal back down to the bone and essentially restore that kind of front bumper to the socket, if you will, to stop that ball portion from sliding out of place.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us here. It's a Jock Doc Wednesday talking Florida Panthers. Aaron Ekblad, his laundry list of injuries sustained during the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Dr. Brandon, with that shoulder surgery, he's saying he's expected to be back in about 3 months. It's been a problem for a long time, and we're going to get it fixed, is what he said Thursday morning, last Thursday that is, saying he'll be ready towards the end of September, maybe October. What does that recovery timetable mean to you, and what's actually going to be going down as he recovers from this surgery?
Yep, and so the important piece you said there is he talked about kind of struggling this for a while. So no doubt he's probably had kind of multiple instability events where this has slipped out. So he's reached that point of stabilization. So yeah, after you fix this up, basically you're in a sling with one of those pillows for anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. Starting out with a little bit of some stretching, range of motion with therapy. After 6 weeks, sling comes off, sometimes after 4, depending on the extensiveness of the repair. And then as you look at that kind of total recovery, typically with these, we're not releasing patients back to kind of full contact until about 4.5 months. There's kind of a window there. It could be 4 months. It could be up to 6, sometimes even up to 7 months. So there is kind of a window period there. I would say on average, though, it's about 4.5 months. And that's really the point you kind of turn them loose to do everything. And then obviously you've got maybe a month or 2 in there to kind of mix in redeveloping your strength, hitting the weight room hard, and kind of returning back to a normal player again. How do you look after these? Patients look great. Still, our biggest concern with these is, can you redevelop instability? So, for example, you're playing a high-level contact sport. You get hit just right. There's a chance you could kind of re-tear that labrum. And so that's always the biggest risk going back to high-level sport is kind of the recurrence or re-injury risk, which can happen.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, a Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Aaron Ekblad of the Florida Panthers, our topic. Dr. Brandon, with him playing with this dislocated shoulder, we mentioned the broken foot, we mentioned the torn oblique. Those are all things that you're putting mileage on you anyway, as intense as the NHL is, and then you factor in, 10 more points with the Stanley Cup final from an intensity and physicality standpoint. Could he have done long-term damage by playing with this shoulder? Because you know how tough hockey dudes are. Could this make his recovery more problematic?
Yeah, you do worry about that. Although, I think about the number of hockey kids we take care of that have basically shoulder labral issues, instability issues. There's so many. The vast majority get back and play. I think over time, depending on the number of years you play, depending on your position, if you're the enforcer, put the people on the boards type, then you're probably going to have some re-injury risk that's pretty high compared to the rest of the players. So, yeah, you do worry about that long term. Ultimately for us, the biggest thing I worry about long term is arthritis. The more unstable that shoulder is, every time that traumatic instability event happens, your cartilage really does take a beating. And so those folks can really end up with some pretty young age arthritis in their shoulder, which is a challenging problem to treat.
Dr. Brandon, you hit on it perfectly about, being that enforcer and physical presence defensively. When it comes to the offensive side, is this going to affect his mobility, his puck handling, or even some shots on goal, because defensemen can come up and be that fourth guy on offense from time to time?
Fortunately for him, obviously the vast majority of what he's doing is kind of below shoulder height. Where we see these folks struggle is if you're a throwing athlete, somebody who's more of an overhead athlete, because obviously our goal with surgery is to tighten things up, and so obviously that's going to change your velocity and your overhead kind of mechanism. If you're more of a, obviously kind of below the waist, kind of player like he'll be with hockey, you can kind of bring the stick up reasonably high to swing and get a slap shot, he's still going to be fine. I would assume all that would be able to regenerate all that power. For him, it just boils down to, one, you got to get your strength back, and two, being able to kind of protect yourself and avoiding those kind of vulnerable positions, which the worst position to be in is with your arm kind of straight out to the side. Somebody runs into it, slams the arm back, which slams the ball portion forward, which is where you don't want to be. And so that's really what he'll have to watch out for.
Dr. Brandon, enjoy time with family and friends up at a gorgeous lake in the Black Hills. Thanks for a few minutes with us today.
All right, guys. Hey, I appreciate it. Y'all take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, Hail Varsity Radio here on a Wednesday. Zipline, downtown Tap House in Omaha. Just a block from the Charles Schwab Field, from the CWS. Wake Forest, LSU, round 2. Tonight, they get going. Is it round 2 or round 3?
Round 2.
Round 2. Round 2 gets going.
And if LSU wins tonight, round 3 will be tomorrow.
Yep, and we'll be back up here at Zipline, North 14th Street, 721 North 14th. The tap room's incredible. Hanging out, watching some baseball. As got some friends across the way that are going to be enjoying themselves in a suite. You know who you are. Thank you for the non-invite.
Oh, man.
Yikes.
Give you the cold shoulder, huh?
Oh, I'm not sweet material.
I got club seats once at Stadium whenever it was TD Ameritrade a couple seasons ago. And I tell you what, that was an awesome experience.
Was it worth it? Was it worth the extra dough?
I didn't have to pay. I got free tickets.
Club
and I
level
got,
is in like major league level, like.
And Carson's turned into a stick his pinky, both pinkies out. I mean, he's like, if it isn't the club or isn't front row, I don't want to go. I was like, well, start planting more money trees, monkey.
Well, it was nice. We got our own entrance, and we got elevator, like a whole row of elevators up to your seats, and then you got to sit outside. But what was nice was on every single armrest, there was the little QR code you'd scan, and that's how you got concessions. Is you didn't go to the lines. You put an order in online, and within 10 minutes, your concessions are right there in your seat. You don't miss out anything in baseball. They didn't card us for the alcohol, which was great because I was 20 at the time. And, that was 21 at the time, I should say.
Way to rat them out.
Wow. Just going to go for it.
And, you got an awesome chance to watch some baseball. So that was actually game 1 of the College World Series. I think that would have been 3 seasons ago. 3 seasons ago? I would have been 19 then because my 20-year-old season was whenever they canceled. No, it was 2019 was the year.
So, talking about sweets, for Junior's birthday, we took him down to OKC. Family members pulled some strings because they work for Chesapeake Energy, and we were in a suite there. It was really cool. And you show up, and there's just a bunch of ice on top of a bunch of Modelo, a food spread for you. And that was his first foray into the NBA.
His first what?
Foray, not four-way. Foray into pro ball.
We got to get you back to nationally scheduled programming here.
Yes, and then the other thing too, man, is He's got some buddies that have skybox seats, and he just ends up dirtying his way into the skyboxes. He did last year.
There is something to be said, though, about sitting with the common people at sporting events. It's a little bit
the common people, Elijah Herbel. That is
going and sitting out with
his commentary
with the peasants. Where the emotions out there are just so much better.
It's awesome.
The people you meet in those type of environments are so much better, and there is something to be said for that. Not only do you save some money, I think you get a better game day experience.
You better make it up if you're calling peasants the normal folks that have to pay the regular seat licenses.
If you're sitting on benches somewhere, I think everyone kind of feels like a peasant in that sense, no matter where you come from.
Well, your ass just hurts. Well, we'll see who shakes out tonight, Wake Forest or LSU.
On that note, we'll end the show.
We'll maybe be back tomorrow. Maybe we won't, depending on if there is baseball. But big thanks, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark, Chris Schmidt. Back at you tomorrow at 4 at Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.